Good evening. Once again, welcome to our series on kosher healing. And thank you once again for all the technical support that I'm receiving from my tech expert. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Tonight, so the blurb called for me to speak about ceremonies and psychedelics. I did the reverse. Last week, we explored psychedelics and how they fit into the halacha, or how the halacha applies to psychedelic use. Tonight, I'd like to address ceremonies, and if there's time still, then to begin even energy healing. We'll see how much time we have tonight for this. Okay, when talking about ceremonies, so we need now to introduce another dimension, another subcategory of Darkei Ha'amori. Last week and the week before, we introduced the concept that the Torah prohibits us from acting in a way that is non-Jewish manner of behavior. And until now, we've been focusing mostly that non-Jewish behavior would be something that it does not follow rational, logical, scientific method proven behavior. Okay, so now in all, Rambam lists that there are actually 4 different levels of Darkei Ha'amori, and that's the most basic. The most basic is that we need to have precision of the truth. As we discussed last time, we explored and elaborated. Scientific method is a compilation of evidence that we're dealing with something that's either always present, it's always there, 9,999 times out of 10,000. That amount of indisputable cause and effect or omnipresence, it's always there. And then a second component of the scientific method is that we have to have a scientific law, a rule of physics, biology, chemistry, something that explains what we're observing, that the indisputable cause and effect is based on some sort of scientific principle. Those 2 components. So that's the very first level, which we dealt with till now, where something doesn't fit the scientific method. So then it is the first stage of Darkei Ha'amori. The Rambam lists 3 more. Okay, a next step in getting deeper into the Darkei Ha'amori, the non-Jewish way of thinking, is false attribution, attributing things to wrong causes. Okay, and this leads to a cult. A cult means black magic. We just finished reading Parsha of Shmos and Va'era, and in those parshios, there are individuals in the drama, in the story, called the Chartumei Mitzrayim. Right? These are the magicians, the masters of the occult. They are able to produce miracles and change the order of nature, right? But doing it in a non-kosher way, which we will explore further later tonight. Okay, but this second and third category of Darkei Ha'amori is now going to be what we're going to explore this evening. Okay, the first one is a non-science. That doesn't mean that something that's the occult doesn't also lack the scientific evidence, the scientific method. It does. It's prohibited not only because it has no scientific method to prove what we're doing, but also because it then leads, it's the second, which is the occult, right? Which we will explain shortly. The first thing I'd like to talk about here is let's talk about a cacao ceremony. Cacao is chocolate beans. That's what we know them, but a cacao ceremony, because we'll deal with this first. Now, what is a cacao ceremony for those who may not be familiar? But it was on the flyer, and one of the questioners who prompted the setting up of the series actually called to inquire about it because it was being sponsored in her community, and then she discussed it, and I told her it's usher. Now, why? So first of all, what is it? Okay, so people get together. There's always a leader, 1 or 2 leaders, sometimes more. And here I have a list of 8 things that they do during the course of a cacao ceremony. Pardon me if all of you are familiar with it, but then I just to be any. Okay, the first thing is the leaders take the group, they sit in a circle around an empty space, or there can even be a table that acts as an altar. But that, of course, should be a giveaway. If there's an altar in the middle, it certainly doesn't sound kosher. But you can always explain it in some way that it's the place for the cacao to live, to stay. Anyway, the first step is always to create a sacred space. Now, they may use some other language, right? We're going to use what's the word with, oh, a ceremonial space, um, and a space to hold the energy, a holding space. They can use different words. Okay, now they sit in a circle, okay, and then everyone goes around the circle and says their name, and then some intention that they want to get out of this event, that they're getting together around the circle and they want to be able to improve something about themselves, their conscious contact with a higher power. They can say all sorts of things which sound spiritual, right? The next step is they pour the cacao. Now, the cacao it's not just plain hot chocolate. There's a special blend and it's prepared a special way. And the people who want to facilitate the ceremony know exactly the recipe and how it's prepared. It's done a special way, and they pass it around the circle. Okay, next comes a honor and bless the cacao. Now, honor and bless the cacao. So some people may think that, oh, make a bracha, and we're makir tov to Ribono Shel Olam that he's giving us the cacao. That's not what they mean, as we'll see in a minute. Okay, they set an intention for the ceremony. Then the leaders now say, after a consensus, that we're going to be concentrating on a certain aspect of a relationship with each other, a connectedness, feeling right, attuned to nature, calm. They're going to set an intention for the session. Then they drink the cacao together. And then after they drink the cacao, then they do breathing techniques, meditation, sound. They have music, dancing, music, okay, sound journey. All right. Then the person leading the cacao, then they tell you, well, this is what we're doing. Okay, and they guide. So it's like a guided ceremony. That's why they call it a ceremony. It's a ceremony. It's a ritual. It's a ceremony. It's a ritual. Okay, and that's what they're doing. And the idea is it increases my connectedness, my spirituality, my feelings of being attached to other people, connected. That word connected. Okay, that's what it is. That's what they do. Now, okay, so now let me read you something about where this originates from. And then anyone with any seichel realizes, right, this is dangerous, but then we'll show you why. Okay, the word cacao, all right, comes from Mayan word. It comes from a Mayan origin. Now, the Mayan used to call them when it was younger, it's no longer politically, the Mayan Indians. That means these are the original people who lived in the Americas. Not all the Americas, but in southern Mexico and Central America. The Mayans had a civilization that was established. It was actually an organized civilization of human beings, people. They were destroyed. The other names that you'll know is the Aztecs. The Aztecs were also in southern Mexico and Central America, and then the Incas were in Peru. They were in South America. You had all of these aboriginal, is the word, tribes, and actually many of them built civilizations, and you can see their temples, and you can see the cultivation of the land that they did and the houses they built. These were people that lived here in America before the Europeans arrived here. Now, in the Mayan language, the word cacao means heart blood. Heart blood. Whose blood? Whose heart? The blood connection comes from the belief that the Mayan gods bled into the cacao pods, and cacao was considered one of the ingredients used to create humanity. Okay, now we're hearing a heresy, right? We're hearing apicursus here. It was also believed that the gods gifted cacao to the people directly. Actually, the scientific name for cacao is theobroma, which translates to food of the gods. And the Maya believed that cacao was a key ingredient in restoring balance and connection to the divine. So according to Mayan tradition, Mayan belief system, okay, this ceremony was a way of connecting with their God, the divine, okay? Mayan legend tells us that whenever there's an imbalance between humans and nature, cacao comes from the rainforest to open people's hearts and return the planet to a state of harmony. Wow. In other words, this is the magic drug, right? That allows balance and settling and grounding and all those wonderful emotional things. But it's a gift of the gods, and it's a way connecting to the gods and connecting to the gods in nature. My dear people, that is Avodah Zarah. Okay, that's Mamish Avodah Zarah, what they're doing. Okay, now, the two things. First of all, um, we are all familiar that Avram Avinu debated the idolaters of his generation, and he diffused them and refuted them. He was very successful to such an extent they ran him out of town. They actually threw him into a fire because it. Now we don't know usually about what type of avodah zarah was he fighting against. What was he? So we think of Getchkas, we think of idols that he. The famous story, Terech left him in charge of the idol stores. So you're correct. Rambam and Moreh Nevuchim in a couple of places and in his commentary on the Mishnah, right? The Rambam in his Guide for the Perplexed and in his commentary on the Mishnah explains who these people were and what were their belief system. He identifies them as the Tzaba. In Aramaic, it's called Tzaba. In English, they're called the Nabateans, Nabateans, Nabateans. Now, their belief system, well, if anyone's familiar with the American Indians, again, they're not a politically correct term. We don't say that anymore. The Native Americans and their original religions with the totem pole, they believed in spirits, okay? And this is also common to the African cultures. What you have a witch doctor in the African and a medicine man in the Native American cultures, original cultures. They believed that behind nature were all spiritual forces. These spiritual forces were their gods. And they did all sorts of ceremonies in order to appeal to these gods or to align themselves with the gods. All right. This is a fantasy. It's all made up. Okay. And this is the Tzaba. This is the Tzaba. All right. And it's idolatrous. And it comes in as idolatrous practice. That's its origin. That's what the cacao ceremony. We just read it from the internet, from the website, if you do a search, or in Wikipedia, or you go on search online, cacao ceremony, I read to you from what they're telling us what it's all about. All right. This is what it is. Now, someone could say, well, Rabbi Kaganoff, okay, they mean it for idolatrous practices. But you know what we're doing? We're doing it in order to connect with Hashem. It's a wonderful procedure. It's a wonderful ceremony. So let's connect to Hashem this way. Okay, the problem is that argument runs contrary to Psukim and Chumash. Okay, in Devarim, chapter 12, Perek Yud Beis, if you say Kapitel Yud Beis, chapter 12, Pasuk 30 to 31. The Pasuk says like this. You better be very careful. Now, Hashem, Moshe Rabbeinu, the name of Hashem is talking to the Bnei Yisrael. This is in Devarim, right? This is in what's called Re'eh, in Akev, in Re'eh. The pasuk is telling us, Moshe Rabbeinu is telling us, okay, Hashem has vanquished the 7 nations of the Canaanites, the 7 nations in the land of Canaan. He's vanquished them before you. He's going to. They'll be vanquished. They'll be destroyed. So Moshe Rabbeinu tells us, be very careful. Lest you get ensnared after these idolaters. After they're already destroyed and decimated, completely gone, you can get ensnared with them anyway. How do you get ensnared with people who aren't present, have been destroyed? Because you'll say, you'll investigate and want to find out about their gods, the gods, Lamor. I want to know, how is it, right? How did these nations serve their gods? Why would I want to know that? The Ese Kain Gamoni. Oh, because you know why Hashem was angry at all these nations? Because they took special means of connection and used it for idols. So that's what caused Hashem to be angry at them and destroy them. But really, they're very effective and they're good ways to do things, and we should use them to serve Hashem. So let's take the services that they used erroneously to their gods, and that's why Hashem was so jealous and angry about him, because that's why he did it. He was so upset because that which was supposed to be for Hashem, they're doing for the gods. No, says Hashem. The next pasuk reads, Lo sasa kain Hashem elokecha. Do not do the services that the non-Jews used for their strength, for their idols. Don't do that to Hashem. Hashem says a reason. Kikol toavas Hashem asher sanei asu lelohehem. Because this that they chose of their own, how to serve their gods or even God himself, is an abomination. It's a to'avas Hashem. It's an abomination of Hashem. He hates it. Those things that they did to their gods, Hashem hates them. So now going back, then the pasuk continues. If you want to know how spiteful, how abominable they are, they even burned their children in fire to their gods. But that's not the thrust of the pasuk. The pasuk is you should be aware that where it can take you. If you go and do their type of thinking and their way of thinking that this is a good way to serve God, well, you may end up murdering your kids for the God too, and that's no. So the Torah says clearly, lo sasi, we're not supposed to use the methods that the non-Jewish worlds to serve their gods, right? We're not supposed to decide, well, that's a nice thing, we're going to do it also. So lo sasi. It also is included, this is one of the lo saseis that goes under the general categorization called darkei ho'amori. That's what it means. That's darkei amori also. These are the ways of the non-Jewish world, and it's prohibited. So, as one wise person said, what's wrong with the cacao ceremony? And the answer is the word ceremony, right? So if a bunch of women, a bunch of people want to get around and have a hot cup of cocoa, right, and just chill out together and feel comfortable in each other's presence without any of the spiritual stuff, right, then that's fine. That's good. And it's healthy and it's mental health supporting. Just drink a cup of cocoa, make a bracha beforehand. But to do a cacao ceremony, the way it's promoted with all of these procedures and in the way following the Mayan traditions, okay, is a lo saseh. It's an issur lo saseh. It won't be necessarily avodah zarah mamish, because I don't know whether that's what the goal is, but we're going to get to shamans in a minute. But just for this, okay. Now, before we go further into the next, so that's cacao ceremony. It's prohibited. There's nothing to talk about. It's darkei amori. It's a lo saseh. It's against the pasuk in the Chumash. I just read it to you. There's nothing further to talk about that. Now, the next piece I was going to talk about are mystical experiences. But before I do that, I'd like to look at handout 13. Now, what were these tzaba doing? In other words, they weren't idiots. I mean, they had a system, and they had a system of service, and it appeared to work. So where do we see that in the framework of Torah? Where does Torah recognize what were the Chartumim doing? Okay, same question. The Chartumim of Mitzrayim, right? So it says that Moshe Rabbeinu came with Aaron and they threw his stick down and it turned into a snake. And the Chartumim did the same thing, right? Or by the first Makkos, Moshe Rabbeinu took water from the Nile, or took the Nile River water and made it into blood. They did the same thing. The Tzfardim, the frogs, the Chartumim did the same thing. How did they do that? How could that be done? Okay, so here, this is actually just a synopsis of what I have in chapter 17 of my book. There are three distinct ways that Hashem gave over to human beings to affect physical creation. Now, we're used to one because we do it all the time. But the second and third ways, we may have heard about it. We may have experienced it, maybe. I don't believe so, but let's talk about it. Okay, the first one is the utilization of natural law and phenomenon. It's what we described last week. 2 weeks ago, we introduced it, and last week we described it more in depth. Minhago shel olam. Minhago shel olam means repetitively, predictable, right? Cause and effect, indisputable cause and effect, and they have a rational, logical, scientific method proven rule, law, how it operates. Like I gave examples last week, most of our life experience, we do this. This is what we do. Our car turns on in the morning, we drive down the street, we cook our food by turning on the gas on the range, electronic ignition lights it. I mean, go through everything in our life, daily life, operates on minhag shel olam. You turn on a radio, we open a computer, listen online to something. Minhag shel olam. How does it work? Well, there's scientific theories exactly how this should work, and then they experimented and they got it to work, and it works over and over and over again. That's minhag shel olam. That's what we know, how we can have dominion, right? That the steam shovel comes and the chainsaw cuts down the tree and the vacuum cleaner works. This is all minhag shel olam, using the laws of electromagnetics and other scientific forces and properties of the materials being used. The copper conducts electricity. Okay, other things are semiconductor. All that is scientific and it works on a regular basis and it's predictable. But we've discussed this. Now, then there are also second and third, it's called spiritual interventions. Now, in Derech Hashem, you'll find a discussion on this. Okay, he calls it, Rabbi Kaplan calls it theurgy in English. Theurgy means theor for God. It's a godly type force intervening. Okay, now, B1, the kosher means is something that our tradition talks about. I mean, these we find in the Gemara, we talk about in the Medrash, we talk about it on the Parsha frequently, all right? Hashem's names can be used by pronouncing them in a precise fashion, and that's the whole different ways of enunciating God's name and the tzirufim and all those other things which we find brought down, okay? Either I can use those in communion and discussion with Hashem directly, and then it creates things. The Gemara relates to two Tanoim, would spend Friday afternoon discussing Sefer Yetzirah, and then upon completion of their conversations, they would create, using the Sefer Yetzirah, they would create a cow, and then that cow they would use to shecht it and use it for Shabbos. There's a question, is it nicht shechita because it was created by Sefer Yetzirah, wasn't born? Okay, but they produced food stuff for them to be able to use on Shabbos. Okay, this is, right, so this can either be done through discussion with Hashem using that communication system, or you coerce Malochim based on Hashem's name. If you want more details, look at the Derech Hashem. Look I don't have offhand not here, but in my Sefer I have the footnote where exactly located, but you can find how it is. Now, B2, which is what the Khartoumim did. This is what we call the occult. There's a principle called Zel Umazeh. Okay, it's a pasuk actually in Mishlei, Koheles, in Koheles, Shlomo Melech says, God created everything in balance. There's always Zeh, the Umazeh, and it refers to the realm of free choice. We always have free choice whether to believe in God or deny his existence. That's always in the balance. Whether I'm the highest madrega like Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe Rabbeinu had the choice to believe in God or not, or we can be the worst Rasha. Okay, think of the worst Rasha, Lavan, Paro. Everybody has free choice at their level. All right, there's a free choice to believe or choose not to believe, to accept God or to reject. Now, at a time and place, okay, when it's possible to use Hashem's names to create changes in nature, changes in creation, physical creation. At that time, if that's a possibility, then there must be, by this principle, this definite axiom, that there has to be equality. So there's going to have to be a way to do it, which is called al-tzad hatuma, right? Using negative spirituality. Okay, these Ramchal calls the interventions of the occult. Now, I have in my sefer a discussion on it. It's in chapter 23, where I cite the Ramban and how this works, how it operates. The Ramban is very clear exactly how this works. Okay, now, what's the halacha concerning these things? And by the way, the occult was exactly what the Chartumei Mitzrayim did. And this is also, the Chartumim are after the Tzaba. The Tzaba were in times of Avraham Avinu. The Chartumim are 400, 500 years later. So the Chartumim Mitzrayim, and later Bilam is a master of this. Okay, and then we have this throughout the ages, as long as there is Nevuah. And even in the Bayis Sheni, where there's still Ruach HaKodesh of a high level, as long as that existed, there has to be available also those who can affect changes using the occult. Now, the Torah says the occult is usher. There are numerous Torah prohibitions prohibiting the occult, all in the involvement. They are all included under the category of Darkei Ha'emori. The Drasha Saran says that Darkei Ha'emori is just a catch-all category. Chazal used the term Darkei Ha'emori to include all of the occult and also the superstitious, which is steps 1 and 2, which we spoke about. The Rambam's step 1, stage 1, stage 2. Stage 3 is the occult. Okay, now, mystical. What about using the kosher means? Okay, now that's no longer available to us. Shulchan Aruch, the commentaries, the Shach, Lavush, the Ramah, and the Kabbalists, the Arizal, Ramchal, many others, under our prevailing circumstances, it's inappropriate and dangerous to utilize this means of human dominion over nature. We have to have certain madregas of Ruach HaKodesh and Tahara. The Shach and the Lavush say this explicitly. These are not available to us anymore. When did they disappear? Sometime in the 1500s. Okay. Arizal says, Ari was in the 1500s, he said that we don't have the paraduma ashes. Without the paraduma, we can't achieve such a tahara, right? And therefore it's prohibited. We cannot involve ourselves in this type of thing. Now there's one more thing. There's charlatanry, all right? That's called sleight of hand. That's called deception. People can do things, magicians. Okay, so the people who play magic tricks and do a magic show, everybody knows that they're, so it's not that I'm trying to fool anybody, because everybody knows. It's just a question of what is his secret? What does he do there, right? That he's a fast hand, that he has this distracted. That's not awesome. But if someone actually uses this deceptive techniques to try to convince people to do things or to influence people, that's usher also, even though I'm not actually doing anything. Okay, and that is the Rambam's additional interpretation of a Darkei Ha'emori, of a Lo Saseh, where he says that not only did the Torah, the Rambam holds like this. Not only, I know this surprises some people, the Lumdim, because they believe that the Rambam didn't hold of the whole thing that he held. It's all nonsense. That's not what the Rambam holds. I prove it in my sefer and in subsequent correspondence. The Rambam did not hold that at all. The Rambam held that the Torah prohibits this type of occult activity, whether it is effective, as it was in the times when there was vis-a-vis, there was the Ruach HaTahara, there was on the holy side of doing it that we described earlier. So there has to be equal and opposite the negative. Then those days, when it was effective, it's usher. The Ram says, but even if it's no longer effective, it's also usher. You can't do this because the Torah says you're not supposed to mimic the activities of the nations of the world. Okay, if you want to see this more in detail, this is in pages 101 to 104 of my Sefer, Alternative Healing is Kosher, is Alternative Kosher. Okay, now, okay, this is some background. Now, let's go on to some, let's go on. Let me talk about another type of ceremony, which is two types of ceremonies, which are unfortunately very prominent. I didn't realize how prevalent they are in our community until client people came to me and told me about it. All right. Now, people engage in certain things called mystical experiences. If you look up ibogaine, it's one of the psychedelics we discussed last week. Ibogaine, if you look on, again, you look up online reports about what ibogaine is used for. So in the cultures where they were prevalent, ibogaine started in Africa, and then under the French colonization of Africa, it moved into France, and then after France, it came to the Central America. All right. So people talking about the use of ibogaine and other psychedelics. You can hear from people using mushrooms, um, other substances. They talk about having prophetic experiences. They saw God. They met up with God. I mean, all of these type of things that they talk about. All right. And you'll see, wow, these are mystical experience. I'd love to be able to engage in that. And they come away feeling so high, right? So fulfilled and high, they really believe they've had a what's called experience. They've had a religious, spiritual experience. They're fooling themselves. Okay. Can we please bring up handout number 1, please? We began the series almost immediately by introducing the concept that human beings have 3 parts. We're not one. We have 3 aspects, 3 planes, and we operate. Okay, these realities are experienced simultaneously. We have 3 different experiences and do not necessarily coincide. And if you recall, I gave an example about someone who finds a delicacy, a food delicacy, and it really tastes good. Okay, and I explained how simultaneously he's undergoing 3 different experiences. Physically, the tastes and the senses and the aroma and the sight, they're stimulated. Wow, this is an enjoyable experience. At that same time, the intellect is assessing, well, this is such an enjoyable experience. Maybe I should use this only for Shabbos or for Yom Tif or for Simchas, only special occasions. And at the same time that's going on, it happens to be no one told anyone and no one knew, but there's not kosher ingredients in this delicacy. So at the same time that the physical aspect is enjoying the experience and reveling in it, and the intellect is assessing, well, is this worthy of a mundane experience? It should only be for special occasions. At the exact same time, my spiritual aspect, my spiritual part, is recoiling and in horror about what's going on because it's being contaminated by a non-kosher foodstuff. It's important for us to always be cognizant of what exactly is being stimulated over here. Now, these people who claim with their use of psychedelics or any other type of thing that they are having prophecy, they're seeing God, they're meeting God, any of all spiritual, wonderful experiences, okay, they're fooling themselves because what they are doing with the drugs, with the psychedelics, notice under the human's physical being and reality, number A, we have over there near the end, sensation. Sensual stimulation, well, like I just described in my example, the body is reveling and enjoying the food's delicacy. It tastes good, it smells good, it looks good. It has all the positive attributes that are stimulating to the physical. That has nothing to do with the intellectual or the spiritual. So what this person is experiencing when they take the ibogaine or the mushrooms or the ecstasy and they feel they're not having a spiritual experience, they're having a physical, an emotional connectedness, an emotional experience. It has nothing to do with spirituality. When they seeing God or they're meeting God, they're playing out things that were in their medama, which I also introduced 2 weeks ago. They have imagination. As a child, they had an imaginative experience. They imagine what God may look like. So under the influence of the psychedelics, all of a sudden they're starting to see God. It has nothing to do with it. It happens to do. But this is how the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim explains people who claim to have prophetic experiences, but they are nowhere near on a madrega on a level of receiving prophecy. It's because they have things in their head that they've collected as a child, and it comes to the surface. It has nothing to do with intellectual experience. It's nothing to do with a spiritual experience. It's all a physical experiences. But people who don't know confuse it, and they get others all excited about it as well. Going back to the cacao ceremony, as I described, is the same thing. So the people sit around and they drink this special brew of cacao, and they feel they're making connected to spiritual entities. It's nonsense. They're not making any connected to any spiritual. It's all about, it's either, let's put it this way, it's either physical or that's part of the occult, that the occult can use this to dissuade a person, to convince a person that they're actually being able to change and do things in the physical realm, but using negative spirituality. It has nothing to do with kosher spirituality, and it has probably nothing to do with spirituality at all. The Rambam actually initially, in his Moreh Nevuchim, initially entertains the idea that it could be a negative spirituality. And then he says, no, it's probably mostly, he says that it comes to a conclusion, it's probably mostly just the physical aspect. That's all it is, nothing more. Now, there's a question here that was raised by one of the questions that came in. Does Halacha see the search for mystical experiences as a form of spiritual ego, or can it sometimes be valid? In simple English, in other words, is this idea that I want to have a mystical experience, is that okay? Or is that something that's just an egotistical type of thing, just a selfish type of, you're not expected. What do you want this for? It says you want to be able to claim in the public arena that I did it. The answer to the question is that no, human beings are supposed to try to communicate and develop our spiritual aspect, see, and do use that conduit to connect with Hashem. Of course we're supposed to, but there's a way to do it, right? The Torah tells us how we can do it. It's listed in the Mesilas Yesharim. The Rambam lists it in his Halacha, both in Yad HaChazaka and in Moreh Nevuchim. Okay, Shlomo HaMelech talks about it. The Torah talks about it. It's what we spoke about the first time. It's about doing mitzvahs properly and with savoring the mitzvahs. The mitzvahs have the means to get to this spiritual, but it doesn't happen without work. I have to develop my character. I have to become a better person behaviorally and emotionally, right? Psychologically. I have to become a person. And that's what the Torah's system is about, developing that. And then it's supposed to lead me to a place where I can then actually have a proper mystical experience. Doesn't have to be on a level even of a nevuah or ruach hakodesh, can be of a lower level. It can be gotten, can be achieved, but it's got to be done the right way. Just by taking some cacao and drinking with a bunch of people, or taking some psychedelic drug and getting high, that is not it. It's self-deception. We're fooling ourselves. We're fooling ourselves with the physical experience and replacing it. Okay, now, one more part of the ceremonies which I'd like to discuss, and then I'd like to also add one more thing to it, but let's now. There is a couple who has made tremendous inroads. At least I know exist because, all right, her name, it's the organization, they call themselves Exist in Love. All right, her name is Genevieve Francis, and he is Stephen Lichtscheidel. All right. The organization is called Walter Enterprises out of Las Vegas. Okay. It's by referral only. I've been referred. I was actually interviewed. Okay. A client of mine came and told me he goes to these events, these what word they call they use it. I have here some of the literature here. Ritual and sacred ceremony, right? Amongst men, um, beloved sojourners. Okay, they have here a whole thing. Some of them take place, unfortunately, they've been invited to, there's things in Monroe, New York, outside of Monroe, Goshen, New York, which is all from Yidden, right? And in Great Neck, Long Island, and in New Jersey, in Southern Jersey, they have, so they get together and they do, but and now this is so strange. To me, it was shocking, but then I realized how what level of ignorance we have here, unfortunately. Um, the they they have um ceremonies, spiritual ritual ceremonies. They gather together and they have a special brew of psychedelics that they are legally, and we'll talk about that in a minute, they legally are allowed to have because it's considered a religious ceremony. And for religious purposes, the government allows them to have it. They have their own mixture, which they don't tell anyone what they have, it's secret. And then they have ceremonies. They meet on a Friday night, they have teepees and all sorts of other attributes where they get together and they get high together. And then they afterwards they have sessions afterwards for what they call integration. So what they're doing is they're blending some psychotherapeutic protocols together with what they call their ceremonies, their rituals. What surprises me the most is that they say right now it's not done. They don't advertise. It's all by word of mouth. I had a client who was there, and then I revealed to him that it's really not kosher. He said, "No, Rabbi, you have to speak to her. It's really good. It's okay, and it's healthy, and it helps me process my trauma." Blah blah blah. And he actually began the introduction, and I interviewed her. She interviewed me, and she gave me materials. And what was surprising to me is that she, right at the beginning on the emails, when it talks about who they are, shamanic marketing at its finest. Shamanic. Shamanic is the word shaman or shaman. Okay. Shamanic healing, shamanic practices, what I described a moment ago about the tzaba and their belief in spirits, all right, and different forces in nature, the spiritual forces, and you have to align yourself with them and access them and manipulate them. That tzaba mindset and thinking, that's what shamanism is. That's what shamanic is. There are many rabbis who erroneously, we'll talk in a minute, many rabbis erroneously tell us that energy healing is kosher, but even many of them say shamanic. Of course, shamanic healing is prohibited. It's avodah zarah. It's the tzaba. It's absolutely avodah zarah. And there's no permissibility at all. And how it is that it's become that there are actually Jews group from people inviting Jen and Steve to have rituals. Women do, Jen does it with women, Steve does it for men only. All right. I have the literature, I have emails they send me regularly to invite me. I don't cancel because I want to keep up to date on what's going on. But it's prohibited. It's avodah zarah. And clearly from what they write and how they what they do, this is the tzaba. This is exactly what Avram Avinu fought against it and debunked it and refuted it. And unfortunately, it's becoming rampant, too prevalent in our communities. And it's also, it's deraisa, and it's very likely avodah zarah, mamish. Okay, now I'd like to then talk one more piece here. Maybe I don't know if we'll get to energy healing still tonight, but one more piece let's talk about. And this is about, I'd like to go to handout number 12. Legal classification. Now, I just mentioned a moment ago that the what do they call their organization? Walter Enterprises, Jen and Steve. They're married, they're a couple. Anyway. Yeah. She says it's only referral based only. Please email me directly and I will make a sacred introduction. Sacred, exactly. Because they're avodah zarah. Thank you for your unwavering love and support. Okay, that's what she writes here, Jen. Okay, now, how does she end up using psychedelics? We discussed last time that the psychedelics are prohibited by law. So that's because it's a religious ceremony. And under religious ceremony clause in the law, they're allowed to act because it's for their religion. Separation of church and state. Therefore, religious practices in the United States are not prohibited or allowed. Each person has a part of a church or part of a recognized religious practice is allowed to have certain leniency. So that's where they get their loophole. So now that brings me back now to something that we didn't discuss last week under psychedelics, but in general, another piece of information which is very important to know. Okay. Concerning substances of this nature, there are actually 4 legal classifications. But as you see here, there's unscheduled, and then there's controlled legal usage, then there's decriminalized and illegal. Okay, now I'll tell you what each of these are in a minute, but what we have to understand, which is most important, is that none of these classifications talk about efficacy, which means effectiveness. In other words, the government can tell us that a certain drug is decriminalized. It can tell us that it's unscheduled, but that doesn't tell us that therefore it's useful and effective as a medication. It doesn't mean that therefore we should use it or do anything with it other than know it's around. I'll give examples soon, but let's go through this. An unscheduled drug, they're not classified. They're not classified as controlled substance, which means they're not regulated, so they're easily available. Okay, an unscheduled drug would be ibuprofen. Ibuprofen is not scheduled. It's readily available over the counter, not regulated. Well, I shouldn't say it's not regulated completely because certain dosages, but you can take as many pills as you want. There's advice on the label, don't take more than 2 at a time every 6 hours. I take 10, 12, 15, I can do that, but it's not regulated in the same sense as we're more used to prescription drugs. That's controlled legal usage. Use is allowed with a medical prescription or under specific conditions and regulations, which is what I just described that Jen and Steve use. They have a loophole, they have a heter, so to speak, and the law permits them because they're doing it for a religious observance, religious ceremony. Okay, now, then we have something called decriminalized, all right? Possession is not criminally prosecuted, but distribution or sales may be illegal. Okay, now, this has various different levels. So, for example, alcohol. Let's talk about alcohol. I guess that's an easy one to work with. Alcohol was never criminal until 1919 in the United States. In 1919, the United States passed an amendment to the Constitution that called prohibition. There was a prohibition days where alcohol was prohibited. So what they learned in the 14 years that this that stood is that if you prohibit the alcohol, so then the underworld, I mean the criminals will make a real business out of the alcohol. And that's where you had the speakeasies. People would have a nightclub or a club somewhere. They'd find a place and they'd cover up, but the alcohol was available. Just it was done in such a way that and then they paid off the police. And that's the story with the Untouchables and the FBI. Okay, anyone who knows American history will know the story about alcohol. Finally, in 1933, they repealed it. They made another amendment and they took back. So now alcohol became what? Legalized, decriminalized. Okay, so now you can buy it. You need a special license to purchase it from a store in many states. Other states, you don't need a license. Varies from state to state. Okay, now, yes, it's decriminalized. Let me ask you, is alcohol considered a healthy thing to drink? So, in moderation, perhaps, right? This is subject to medical studies on a regular basis. Okay, right now, at this point in time, it says that it's okay and good for health to drink once a week, all right? A couple of ounces of alcohol. Gee, the Halacha says on Shabbos, we're supposed to have alcoholic beverages as part of our Onik Shabbos. So medical science is caught up with what the halacha recommends. To have alcohol every day in high amounts, no, it's not good. It's contrary to good health, and you may end up with an addiction to it, called alcoholism. And then you're diseased, and you get sick, right? It can also impair functioning. So now at least there are signs on the bottles, right? Be careful if you're drinking, not to run up. Pregnant women shouldn't drink it, and you should, and if you do drink it, don't operate a motor vehicle or heavy equipment, machinery. There are warnings, but it basically is decriminalized. Okay, it's decriminalized, but that doesn't mean it's efficacious. Can I use alcohol to treat a cold? There's no proof that drinking alcohol is going to help a cold. Okay, there's no scientific method study done on that. Right? Can I use alcohol to treat any one of another ailments that are, anecdotally or even just by, what you say, Bubamyces, old wives' tale, just people, rumored it works. No, because that's not scientifically methodology proven. And if one does such a thing, then that's Darkei Amori of stage 1. You can't do that. How about cannabis? This is a big one. Cannabis in many states has been legalized, or I shouldn't say legalized, decriminalized. And then there's the what they call recreational use of cannabis. It's all the conversation. The conversation abounds about whether it should be criminally or not criminally, whether it's harmful. But is it efficacious for the treatment of diseases? There is a whole movement, a cannabis movement, that says that cannabis or its derivatives, right, can be used to effectively treat diseases, certain diseases. I would ask them to say, can I see, please, the scientifically method studies that have demonstrated this? And are they enough to meet the requirement of a phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 that we discussed last week? Because before I start believing that cannabis can help treat a certain disease, I need to see if it's past phase 3 studies. If it hasn't, so then the halacha would not approve of its use for treatment of a disease. Recreationally, is it healthy long term? It doesn't just not cause terrible harm, but does it cause some harm? Then there's the mitzvah nishmartim od nafshosechem. Again, what do the scientific studies say? Okay. Now, let me give an example here. Okay. We have many things in our house which are poisons. So, for example, we have pesticides, we have things we use to kill the unwanted insects in the house, mice. We don't talk about them in the house, but mice traps and mice poisons. Oh, how about the cleaning agents? We have lots of things that are bleach or petroleum distillates, right? It's a great solvent, petroleum. It's used in some what's it called, Gugan, and there's other things that less oil there's a petroleum in there. Petroleum is gasoline. Petroleum distillates are not such a volatile cousin. It's not, but it's part of the petroleum distillates. Okay, these are all available in the house. Does it mean that you eat them? Does it mean you take them for medical treatment? Of course not. It's usher. We don't do that type of thing. You can't do that. All right. So therefore, halachically, mitzad the mitzvahs of taking care of one's health or of treating disease, just because something is decriminalized doesn't mean that therefore I'm allowed to use it. I can use it as a treatment. Okay, now this is only mitzvah. I'm only discussing the halacha here of the Darkei Amori aspect of its use. All right. There's another aspect which I'm not going to even touch on tonight. We're not going to discuss it at all in the series, and that's Dinah de Malchusa. All right. To what degree is a Jew obligated by Torah law to adhere to the secular laws of the country that he lives in? This is a topic that is widely misunderstood, unfortunately not fully researched. I did a major research project on this recently, and I've written it up, and I showed it to a world-renowned posek whose name everybody knows, and he has encyclopedic knowledge of Torah. And I showed him the Rambam's opinion. Rambam, what are you talking about? The Rambam doesn't say anything about this. And I showed him that the Rambam says something which has been missed, but if one pays attention, the Shulchan Aruch actually passes like the Rambam. And heretofore, most of the conversation does not include the Rambam's opinion or the Shulchan Aruch's proper understanding of the Shulchan Aruch in the conversation about Din Malchusa. I'm not going to get involved in that right now. I'm not going to talk about it at all. But certainly, even with just what is known, okay, there are many poskim. Shulchan Aruch probably agrees with this. My opinion definitely agrees with this, is that if the law of the land prohibits usage of a substance, Din Malchusa requires us, not just because of Nishmarta Me'od Nafsh, not because of the Darki Hamori aspect, because it's not efficacious, and not only because it's contrary to the mitzvah of taking care of my health or helping someone else heal, but it also violates another aspect of Torah law, that I'm supposed to follow the law of the land. Okay, but that's a separate thing. Now, I didn't cover the fourth piece here, illegal. Now, something that's absolutely entirely illegal, but that's what I'm talking about here. Okay, now, last week, when I discussed the various different drugs, ketamine, which is approved, but again, ketamine is an item 2. It's controlled legal usage. Okay, that is ketamine. Can only use it under the, and that's the halacha of Darkei Amorid. The scientific method tells you how you're supposed to use it. That's how you have to use it. Mushrooms, because it has only a phase 2, right? Therefore, it's a scheduled drug. It's a scheduled drug, right? Psilocybin is a scheduled drug, and therefore it is prohibited. We're not supposed to use it because it has addictive qualities and it can be dangerous. And MDMA, like I said last week, hopefully the studies will get, they'll fix up the problems with the studies and they'll do the studies properly. Maybe MDMA will be approved, ecstasy, but if it's approved again, it's only under the prescribed method. That's what the Halacha of Darkei Hamori requires. Nishmat the mitzvahs and Nishmat the Me'od Nafsh Seichem, and taking care of your own health and healing others, and likewise all the others that we discussed. Those are either controlled substances that are prohibited, or in some of them are even criminalized and absolutely illegal. Okay, and therefore it is prohibited to violate those laws. Okay, let's see, what is it? We have 2 minutes. Okay, so I do not believe it's appropriate now for us. I was really next wanting to start energy healing. So what we'll end up doing is we'll have to wait till next session. Okay, we'll wait till next week to do energy healing. And Emir Hashem, hopefully at the end of next week's session, we'll have finished energy healing. And then we're going to be changing somewhat the format of how these shiurim will be available. They'll still be available through the YouTube channel. They'll also be available on the alternate Google Drive channel, as you saw in the letter that was sent out earlier this week. And there will also still be the call-in line platform where you can call in on a telephone. You don't need an internet connection. However, we will probably not have, next week, we will still have a Zoom session where people can be in person here. Okay, but afterwards, then we probably will not have the Zoom in person, but it will be available through the 3 platforms that I just mentioned. Of course, questions you can still send in through the Kosher Healing email address or through my own private email address, which is available in both of my svarim. Okay, so please feel free to ask further questions if there are any. And then, Mr. Hashem, next week we will once again reconvene and discuss the issues with energy healing, which are manyfold. Okay, we'll talk next week. Thank you very much for listening and joining. I appreciate it. Good night.